in advance, but thank you everyone for joining to the contributors track in August. We have 3 demos lined up, and we have my favorite part of these sessions, the contributor spotlight chat. So yeah, let's just get started. I just have one announcement to make. Backstage Con is coming up in Detroit alongside KubeCon. It's in about 2 months. So yeah, please go ahead, buy tickets, find out who's going there, use hashtags, and the link is in the chat where you can find more details. And Patrick was waving his hand. So yeah, excited about that. Other than that, still after summer break, so not too much to announce. Maybe I can just go on the spot here because it's a contributor spotlight, so nothing too official. Are there any maintainer updates, Patrick, Johan, anything you'd like to, share out? Or how you're feeling to be back?
Oh, it's good to be back. We can actually share a couple of things that we didn't quite have time for in the adopter session that are just being rolled out now in the next releases. So first one that it's actually released now, I believe, is that we're moving transpilation over to SWC. So this is kind of low-level TypeScript to JavaScript compilation baked into the Backstage CLI. So in particular, Ben JD Lambert has been working on moving us over to be able to use SWC, which is the Rust-based transpiler. It's a little bit slower than the one we were using, which was Sucrace, but it's a more well-maintained, and in particular, we get React fast refresh with that, which is pretty exciting for front-end development. And I hope I'm on a slightly dodgy connection. I hope I'm not.
You are crystal clear and very
excellent.
Spots.
Two other things that we're working on. I'm pretty confident we'll be able to ship the React router bump in the next release. We've been working on that hard, especially this week and a bit before the summer. It looks like there are almost no changes required at all, pretty much, because we're able to build a lot into the core, just how we do things in the core, working around breaking changes and so on. And it seems to be mostly managing dependencies. There might be some tricky stuff to handle in plugins, but generally in apps, it should be pretty minimal changes. Yeah, some breaking tests perhaps. I think is the stable version is a lot more strict about how you structure routes. And then the last one is I'm hoping to get the Yarn 3 bump out. It is already possible to bump your own projects to use Yarn 3. Our CLI tooling supports it. It's a bit trickier to do in the main repo. We want to get that out so we can use the workspace version queries to avoid merge conflicts when we're doing releases all the time, and hopefully some speed benefits. I'm not sure exactly how it compares. Any news on material MIUI v5? Sorry, 3 major bumps is enough for now. We'll most likely deal with MIUI v5. Maybe I wouldn't say the release after this one, but we'll definitely. It's the next big version bump for us to tackle, so we'll be going on to that one afterwards. Right, that's it.
That was a lot of good news for developers. So yeah, I think a lot of people were asking React Router, MIUI 5 is there, yeah. So thank you, Patrick. If anyone has any questions, please throw them at Patrick. He's around along with the other maintainers. Keep the conversation going. All right. Next up, we have, first of all, just the agenda. We have 3 demos coming up. We have first one, Phil here. He's going to do a quick demo of his new proposed playlist plugin, although it was 21 days ago, so maybe it's already implemented. Who knows? Then we have Kamil from DAZN, and he's going to do a demo on his Github Issues plugin. So that's exciting. The last one is from our very own Taras, and he's going to do a demo on, it looks complicated, so I can't just read on the spot. I'm going to talk about incremental ingestion backend plugin and the incremental entity provider. So I'm really looking into that to understand what that means. So before we begin, we'd like to do a contributor spotlight chat. If you don't already know, you can nominate someone from the community whom you have been noticing from the link backstage.io/nominate. Go ahead. If you notice someone doing great stuff on the Backstage project, please enter their name and we'll have one of these chats here. And this time, drum rolls, it's Taras himself. It's about time, Taras. So good to have you here and congratulations.
Thank you, Himanshu. It's an honor and a pleasure.
I'm sure we have seen you dozens of times, but for the folks who are new here, can you please introduce yourself and how you come to Backstage?
Sure. I'm Taras Mankovski. I'm CEO of a company called Frontside. We are a DX consulting company. So Backstage, when Backstage came out, we kind of jumped on it right away. And we've been working with Backstage, I think, for almost a couple of years now. So, and we have a few, like our work is helping companies succeed with Backstage and helping their developers learn and deploy their Backstage instances and improve it, and iterate on them. So we've learned quite a lot, and so we're starting to share things that we've learned. So the thing that I'll be talking about later today is one of those things we've learned that we created for one of our clients, and we're open sourcing it now. So it's it's pretty awesome. I love being able to contribute to open source by working with companies that use it. So it's pretty amazing setup.
Yeah, 2 years with Backstage. Do you have any highlights to share with your journey so far? Any noticeable moments when you saw something, when you contributed something big, or when you were working on something big which got you really exciting? So, do you have any favorite personal moments?
Oh, there's so much stuff. I mean, because we've been through the processing, the ingestion journey for the last 2 years. So, going through each stage of the trying to optimize ingestion, especially for cases where you have a lot of data. So there's a lot of wins there, but I think the biggest, the part that I'm probably most excited about, it's not something that is ready for the general mainstream Backstage yet. But the thing that I'm really excited about that's happened recently is that the shift to use that we implemented the ability to use GraphQL to populate Elasticsearch indexes. It's really it kind of blew my mind. So it was really cool. It's also kind of a big evolution of the work that we've done. So all of that stuff is still we're pulling those things out incrementally. We have the GraphQL plugin that's released, but we're iterating on it now. And then the Elasticsearch iterations next. But I'm hoping that over the next year or so, this stuff will become more mainstream within Backstage community. So I look forward to discussing all these things with everyone.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in here who would like to thank you for so much that you and your team has done. How do you like this community over let's say other open source communities? Are there some patterns or some behaviors that you really enjoy here? Would you like to share something on that?
Yeah, I really love. I think the CNCF's focus on being vendor neutral, I think, is really healthy because there are a lot of companies using Backstage, but there's also a lot of companies like us that want to help companies use Backstage. So having a community that's open to companies that we don't work everyone we work with, their job is to build Backstage instances. Our job is to help them be more productive and help them do more kind of complicated things. We do build plugins, we teach developers. So, but our work is more kind of meta. It's less directly crunching the code of Backstage instances. So having a community that's open to and transparent to that kind of participation from vendors, I think, is very healthy. And it's something that happens in the cloud native ecosystem, but it's not something that's it's not necessarily not every community is that way, simply because not every community has this rule of being open to different kinds of commercial entities. So that this has been, I think this is, the fact that this is the case has really allowed us to kind of like be ourselves, in the sense that we want to be helpful, and that's how we, we work by being helpful. Like we continue to operate with being helpful, and so being able to provide as a service to our customers is really like very, very important to us, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah, totally. And lastly, there's always people asking, how do I get started with Backstage? It's such a cool project, and I want to make contributions and learn more about it. From your personal point of view, do you have any ideas, any tips you'd like to share with those new young contributors?
For contributing, I mean, I think there's a lot of it's a little bit tricky to know right off the bat, like where the boundaries are, like what are the things that you can contribute to. And then there are like what I do a lot is, when I encounter something that needs to exist, like I go and create an issue about it, and like kind of, so that even if it's a feature request, so I could just get people's opinion on how we could solve that problem. So I think the first, if anyone wants to contribute, I would say it's going to start off with find something that needs to be improved, and get an idea from people if that's something that'll be helpful to them. Get some early feedback on how that could happen by creating an issue, and then work on it if that's what you want to do. But you can also get, like, a nice thing about doing that is that you get feedback about how you could approach a problem before you get working. You can actually you kind of increase the chances of getting it right the first time, and that's really, you want to be productive with your time. And so if you can either pick up something that already exists, like there's an issue that exists that's already been, that's kind of like is a known thing that is necessary, or just if you're going to start something new, get feedback on it as early as possible, so you really are able to make best use of your time. Make sure that something that you'll create will actually be useful for others, and it can make it into the core or into the repo.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely feel free to ping Taras anytime if you need advice or talk about ingestion. I think he's always there on Discord and GitHub to chat. But joking aside, yes, Taras, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for contributing to Backstage so much. I think a lot of people appreciate your work. So, and congratulations again. See you around. I think see you in a few minutes for the demo.
Sounds good. Bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Moving on, we have Phil. And Phil, are you around? Good to see you again, Phil. What do you have in store for us today?
Okay, thanks, Himanshu. Let me share my screen. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Phil, longtime contributor and adopter. Today, I want to demo an idea I had for a plugin known as the playlist plugin. So some background information about this. I thought it would be a good idea to have a way to package up collections of entities in a way that makes sense based off how you define that they are related. But also be able to share that. Another way to put that is, so right now you're able to star certain entities, and then you're able to see them under your starred entities. There's also the shortcuts plugin, which you could shortcut certain pages. But right now there's no way to really share that with someone else. So say you have a collection of a lot of entities that you really like. There is some logical sense to why you group them together, but you also want to share with other members of your team so they could reuse your list and maybe build upon that. So possible use cases are building collections of entities that are good to start out for a new engineer who wants to onboard, collections of documentation entities that make sense to go together as your company's getting started documentation, and then whatever you want. The possibilities are pretty much endless there. But heavily being inspired from playlists from Spotify itself. I took the same idea here. So I created this new plugin where you're able to create these listings of entities. So for example, here, there's 2 available entities. And the cool thing here is you could follow certain entities. So a lot of the interactions here, I pretty much was inspired from looking at the playlist functionality in Spotify itself. So you could look at entities that you follow. Also, same as like starring entities, and you're able to look at them, see what entities are part of them, add descriptions, see how many people are following it, and then see how popular they are, and then link you to the entities itself. So I'll demo how to create a new playlist. So I'll create this, create a new playlist, add a description, choose an owner, I'll choose myself. And then you have an option to make either public or private. Just as it sounds, public means it will be visible to other people. Private would mean it's only visible to yourself. So pretty much the same as having like a list of starred entities, but grouped under one name. So I'll make this public. And then you're presented with this. Here you could choose to follow the playlist. So I'll follow my own list. And then adding entities here. So you're presented with a search results dialog. So say I want to find some entities, add it to my list. So you see them show up here. Find some more entities. And then they all appear under your playlist. Then if you want, you can also easily remove them. So going back here, you'll see that now we have our new Backstage demo playlist. There's 2 entities and 1 follower, which is me. And then just to give you another demo here, is also another way to interact with this plugin. You could go to an entity directly itself, and there's a way to hook it up where you could, from the entity, say, I want to add it to a playlist, and this will display the list of available playlists for you to choose, or create a new one from this entity. And so I picked my one I just created, and then it got added to the Backstage demo playlist. And going back, you'll see that it's been added here. So that's pretty much it. Right now, it's pretty straightforward and simple. The main idea is getting the functionality there, opening up the possibility of just creating custom lists, like ad hoc lists, being able to share with other people that use Backstage. And then perhaps if you're one of the integrators of Backstage, you could highlight certain playlists. Very similar to the scaffolder plugin, you might want to highlight certain playlists that are deemed like your golden paths or golden playlists, and use that to really make discoverability easier for certain entities. A few more notes about this plugin. It's also fully integrated into the permissions framework. So it does ship with a default set of permission rules that allow you to edit certain playlists if you own it. But you're freely able to customize it based off whatever rules you want, who can see it, who can edit it, who could delete entities and whatnot. So that's pretty much it. Like Himanshu said, it is a proposal. It's not been merged in yet. So I have a PR here. So paste that into the chat if I find out where it is. But anyways, the PR is here. Feel free to comment on it, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. I also list some future enhancements that we could probably do to make more improvements in the future. That's pretty much all I have. I don't know if there's any questions.
It's a really, really cool plugin. Entities and songs, that's it's synonymous here. I love that you can create plugins like right from like its own page, but when you're also looking at an entity, you can just go ahead and add to existing ones. And yes, thank you for sharing the link in the PR. What's next? Spotify also does recommendations. When you already have a playlist, it recommends you more songs that you can add. I'm just joking, but I think it's really cool. I think there's a lot of possibility with such collections. So let us know if you have any thoughts as well in the comments. One possibility I was thinking was, let's say you have to do something, and that involves like doing something in mass to a lot of entities. Let's say 100 things. So if you already have these collections ready, maybe there's some actions which can be done on this collection, so that everything gets propagated. Yeah. Any other thoughts from anyone about this? And it's also awesome that you hooked it up with the permissions framework. So pretty advanced. So one similarity that I was seeing was you would create systems like this as well. So there's like, if there are entities which are related, like if a system like Backstage has a front end, has a back end, has a resource database, I think system also looks as a collection to me. But this is much more advanced. You can like create bigger collections and not be limited by these resources systems.
Yeah, it's fully custom however you want to put the list together, so they might not be logically related or related by architecture at all. But you could even, I mean, you could add any type of entity. You could add users or groups into a list, maybe form collections there.
Yeah. It's really cool. Awesome. Are you tempted to add the possibility of applying actions or aggregating data across the lists? Patrick asks in the chat.
Applying action. So is this, I guess, the kind of like the suggestion where you have a collection of entities, maybe perform some kind of migration on them or unregister audits? That might be possible. So, I mean, once you have the logical collection there, it's definitely possible to add custom actions on top of them. So shouldn't be that hard to extend it. So that's definitely a route that might be an enhancement in the future. Tech Insights score. Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea. Adding the Tech Insight scores, getting metrics across custom lists. I think the plan was, I might be wrong, but I thought the plan was for Tech Insights to eventually that be based off groups and the entities owned by the groups. But this is another way to do it where, you know, based off these custom collections, someone might want to go and see the metrics behind it. I really like that idea. I hope to see that as well.
Yeah, indeed. So thank you, Phil. Amazing plugin. Keep the conversation going in the chat. And thanks again for showing us through the plugin. See you around.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Kamil. Hello.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself and tell us what you'll be showing us.
Yes, of course. So my name is Kamil, and I will share a little bit about the plugin that I created, which is Backstage Github Issues plugin. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see a screen. It looks beautiful. Slides.
Okay. So I would like to show everybody the Github Issues plugin. And with this presentation, if you ask me about the goal, I would like to get you interested in using it and share a little bit of the learnings through this contribution. But first of all, my name is Kamil. I represent Poland. I live in London in the United Kingdom. And I work at developer experience team at DAZN, where I had the chance to work at the DAZN instance of Backstage. And something that is very important for me to stress out is this is my first ever open source contribution. And when I was imagining that moment quite long, and I always thought that what I need is a cool name. But to be honest, there wasn't too much space for maneuver in naming for this plugin. So it is called GitHub Issues plugin, but I like to think about it as GHI, and that's why Ali G will be our companion through this presentation. So I split the presentation into 3 parts. I would like to tell a little bit about why, the context of this work, a little bit about why, which will be actually the GHI plugin overview, and also a little bit about the development and the architecture, which actually is sharing a little bit about the learning that I came upon while working on this plugin. So the why. So why this plugin was created? In DAZN, we love Backstage. We use it a lot. We use it every day. We use it a lot because it is our main software catalog. We have a lot of, not a lot, but some DAZN specific plugins, like for example, visible here front-end targets, where you can list all versions of software deployed to all our devices. And we are working on more. And we also use it every day. We use it every day because of the great pull request plugin. And when we introduced that plugin, we had a very positive feedback from our teams. People were very happy about it. And actually, they were asking us that it would be super nice to have a similar way to view GitHub issues in Backstage. So we took a note. And also we use it every day because in DX, we're trying to promote Backstage as a primary way to view software documentation. And we were very happy when the Tech Docs add-on was introduced. And straight from Backstage, now we can open a GitHub issue with the feedback to the documentation, because we know documentation gets outdated. And very ironic, I would say, or funny thing is that we found out that those issues actually also get outdated because nobody notices them, because most of our team use Jira to manage their project. So that's why the plugin was created. But what is it? The what part. So the GitHub Issues plugin renders the list of open issues from GitHub associated with the entity. Here we can see that the plugin is rendering issues from many repositories. And the plugin can actually work in 2 different ways, depending from the entity type where it is rendered. If it is rendered in the entity of a group or a user type, it is rendering issues from all repositories for which the entity is the owner. However, if it is rendered on the API or a component entity, it just renders issues from one repository assigned to that entity. All of that is done by the well-known GitHub annotation. The plugin can be rendered as a page or as a card, and it exposes 2 dedicated components, GitHub issue card and GitHub issue page, as we can see the declaration here. And the number of issues per repo plus the number of issues per page are controlled via props. And here we have a nice type declaration for the props. The plugin supports an empty state where there are no repos assigned to the entity. And also it supports an empty state where there are no issues in GitHub. However, if there are some issues, the issue card renders basic information about the issue, and clicking on the card opens the GitHub issue page so we can dive deeper into it. Here we can see that that the plugin renders the repo name where the issue was created, who is assigned to it, title, how many comments there are, who created it when, and also when it was last updated. And important to notice that when the plugin is rendered on the group or the user entity, so when we are rendering the list of issues from many repositories, those issues will be ordered by the time of last update. So the freshest stuff will be on the top. And when we are in this mode of rendering issues from many repositories, users can easily filter repositories for which the issues are rendered with usage of this beautiful multiple selection select component provided by Backstage. So this brings us to the last part, the how. So the most important thing is that the plugin is using GitHub GraphQL API to get all the data. And to mitigate the race condition of sending too many requests, all of those queries are combined into one GraphQL query with the usage of GraphQL fragment and sent as one request, which actually, when enabled in our DAZN Backstage instance, resulted in a very interesting finding. So basically, it's possible that the API will return only partially successful response or a partially failure, depending how you look at it. And in that case, plugin can render only part of the data successfully returned, and the errors are posted to the core plugin API, the error API provided by Backstage. If you ask me about the most important learning from this work, is that to move all the HTTP communication to the plugin API. So in the first version, when I started, I used GitHub hooks to get the GraphQL client, to create the query, and to get the data. And that worked fine. However, in a situation when I was working on the mitigating the issue with partial failure, it was very difficult for me to mock the data and test everything properly. So after moving the API access to the plugin API, everything became very pleasant. So now the API layer can be tested separately for the correctness of the queries and how we handle those edge cases. And then when we are testing the rendering part, we just mock the API response and everything works like a charm. Also, it was very easy to provide a local development environment with mock data after migrating to the API. Making it happen. That's all. Thank you very much. I didn't create a demo, but if you want to see how the plugin works, you can just download the Backstage repository, and in the plugin folder, after running yon start, you will see how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamil. And so that means it's official. It's already in there. So yeah.
Yes.
And thanks for sharing your journey, like how you folks like the plugin. Kudos to the Tech Docs team as well for their add-on of creating new issues for docs. Yeah, any questions for Kamil or the team? I see Talita in the chat as well. I think, yeah, you folks worked on it, or a similar plugin, if I'm not wrong.
The pull request plugin.
Yes, the pull request plugin. Cool. We have Patrick asking, hello, as you thought about, sorry, Patrick, about displaying issue labels, and perhaps being able to, I think he's doing the GHI accent. So have you thought about showing issue labels and perhaps being able to label issues from the plugin itself?
No, I haven't thought about that. It's just the first minimal set of, let's say, functionalities there. But because I'm very proud of this, adding the test and API layer and making the local development easy, I think it's also, it should be quite easy to extend it later.
Cool. There's Talita asking about your inspiration behind the beautiful, pretty slide decks.
That is working in the DX in the zone.
Absolutely. It has to look good. It has to feel good when you're looking at it. Cool. Kamil is here. If you have more thoughts around the Github Issues plugin, I had one. It was, I noticed a lot of these plugins making use of GitHub APIs to show things, and I think that's pretty good. But some of these plugins use the REST API, some of these use the GraphQL API. And I wonder, like, when you were creating this, did you find all the help on the GitHub integration side from Backstage? Or did you feel like if there were some bits which were missing and if they were like already there, my job would have been easier? Because integration with GitHub for a plugin, I think, is a very common use case. So any thoughts around it?
So when I worked on that, I spent like some time I did in my DAZN time, but a lot of time I spent in my private time. And in that time, I was actually trying to hack things around and create things. So actually, I have to admit that I didn't spend too much time in the documentation, but I was just looking through the other plugins, how they implement stuff. And this is how I kind of like came upon what I created. But to be honest, I really love the documentation and the API, and the developer experience in Backstage is super nice. I mean that I only done a little bit of work before working on that plugin, and then within like say first week I was able to kind of like start moving quite quick forward. And I hope my next contribution will be much smoother.
I hope that too. So that clearly means there are no big gaps there. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks for creating the plugin. Thanks for talking about it. Really appreciate it. And see you around, hopefully, Kamil.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day. And time for the last demo. We have Taras, who is going to talk about incremental ingestion backend plugin. Hello. Or hello.
Hello, and it is nice to be back. So I'm not gonna show a demo because demoing streaming logs is not particularly fun. So I'll just talk about the kind of why this was created. The name is a mouthful. It might change, but depending on what we end up doing with this. But I did in spirit of Kamil here, it's the FBPIIBP plugin. So, I will talk about why this thing exists, and then why we created it, and then we can talk, and then I'll show you kind of what it looks like. So the idea here essentially is that entity providers with Backstage, they provide two kinds of mutations. So you can have an entity provider that uses delta or full, or an entity provider can use both, but essentially, if you're doing a delta, you're telling Backstage that, or the Backstage catalog that these are the things that have been added or removed. And if you're doing a full, you're just saying here are the entities that I want to provide, and then Backstage the catalog figures out which of the items are in the catalog, which ones have been removed, and so it automatically deletes the things that are not that are not being committed with the full mutation. So we've actually spent quite a bit of time, working with this API, and what we found is that in cases when you have really big data sets, so for example, like if you have 120,000 users in LDAP, and the backend doesn't give you it doesn't give you like a streaming kind of API where you could say, okay, well, this user was receive a specific notification when the user was deleted. What you end up having to do is you have to do a full ingestion, but of a lot of data. And this has a whole bunch of kind of problems with that. Like when you're doing a full ingestion, you need to have all of the entities essentially in memory. And if you have like 100,000 plus entities, that is a lot of memory. And this has all kinds of problems that you end up having to deal with. Like one is you have to have a lot of memory. So your process cannot run out of memory simply because you have a lot of data in memory of the process. Or if you've processed all that data, what happens then is you are dumping all of these entities into the processing pipeline in one shot. And then that means that all of those entities, like if there's anything else that you have in a pipeline that comes afterwards, like all of those entities need to be processed before the other entity providers get any of the entities processed. So it's like, it creates these kind of spikes of entities entering into pipeline. And in some cases, like because we have, like in the project where we created this, there was like 8 entity providers, or there's 170,000 records, and they're all being processed, which led to like multiple hours of it would take hours for entities to get processed. And so what this does is it provides kind of a hybrid. It's a hybrid of, we're essentially doing a full mutation using deltas. So it's a kind of a hybrid approach. So instead of doing one full mutation where everything happens as a single, like you're accumulating all of those entities in memory, and then you're committing a single, list of 120,000 entities. What this backend does, it spreads that ingestion over a period of time. So it does it in bursts. So we do like, so if you have like 100,000 records, it is going to do like, I will do ingestion for 2 seconds, then I'll wait for 2 seconds. They'll do ingestion for 2 seconds. They'll wait for 2 seconds. You can control the intervals, but essentially what it does is it allows you to do, and like at every burst, it commits the entities, like it does a delta mutation to commit the entities. And once it's gone through the whole list, it goes and does a sweep to delete the entities that are not in the new data set. So it's a kind of a combination. So like you could have a single ingestion that happens, instead of it being executed in one shot, you would have it like burst. And like once it's completed the entire data set, it would just like determine what has been committed and what has been seen, and the things that have not been seen, it deletes afterwards. So, and then like we're essentially using this, like I'll show you kind of what this looks like as an actual entity provider. But the idea here is that because we're breaking up the ingestion into smaller bursts, we can control each burst. And so for example, we could say like, and we can continue. So like, let's say if you encounter a rate limit, you encounter a rate limit, you can give it a moment, like it will automatically back off for a minute, and then it will restart. So it won't fail your ingestion, and it won't like continue clobbering your API. It will automatically handle like retrying the actual next burst or the next iteration within a burst when it's ready. So there is, or when your rate limit is reset. We're still like, this is still fairly early stages. Like we have the mechanism, we're using it already, but there's a lot of things that we can do. Additionally, before I show you actually what it looks like in the implementation, like are there any questions about this? Like curious what, and we can talk about anything about this or how the mechanism works. Like what questions do you have? Actually, let me see if there's something in chat. No questions?
I had one. I was thinking like,
yeah.
So when you say like, if there's like 100K entities and there, the catalog memory is going to be loaded. So like, what are some numbers, if you have them in mind, like how much RAM or how much CPU and how much entities? Like when does one would start to use this plugin or something like non-standard?
I honestly think that like, I think this approach should be the default. I mean, like I would, so basically anytime you have paginated results, I think this is the approach that should be taken, that should be the default. Because I think for the challenge is that it's hard to account for all the different cases in which full ingestion can fail, and it can fail. It could be fine locally with the local data set, but then when you run it in production, you have a different data set that's bigger. You could have one set of, like your process is going to have a lot of memory on your local machine, but it runs in production on a different kind of a node. So there's a lot of, or even like, as your plugins grow, you have more plugins being installed, and now there's more like these different plugins are all competing for memory within your process. Like there's all these different reasons why your constraints on memory can happen, that I really think that for like a standard full ingestion is something, or it's a full mutation should be something where you really know, like you know very well what specific like your data sources. So like if you know that you're gonna have like your data source is never gonna grow beyond like, let's say 1,000 or 10,000 entities, then yeah, then it could be fine to use a full mutation. But if you're going to be creating many entity providers because you have lots of data and you need a primitive that you can use to ingest a lot of data. This is specifically like for discovery. I think this is really helpful because you don't know how much data you're going to have because that's part of the discovery. Is you're discovering the data sources. It's not a finite number of like today you can have, if you're doing one organization, but tomorrow you're doing 10 organizations, you're going to have, and then tomorrow you might have 11th organization. Like the way you ingest that data should be the same, so you don't have to worry about that change. It should just happen. So I think for this kind of use cases, it's like we need something that is going to just work, like, and accommodate those use cases without having to rethink your approach. And for that reason, I think if you're doing discovery, like we need something like this. I think there's some conversations about what this might look like. Like this was the approach that we end up taking, that we end up implementing for our particular situation. And I think if this approach is, if this approach works for others, like we'd like to, provide this upstream so it will actually be part of course for others to use. Because I could show you what that looks like. There's quite a lot of, let me show you. Does that answer your question, Himanshu?
It does, partially. I was thinking in general, like there's room for some benchmarking for like Backstage performance and how catalog works, and so that the customers are, they know what to expect, and they're ready. But I was just going on a tangent there. There's a question in the chat if you want to address, otherwise, go ahead with the demo.
So what we do is, so the question is, how does delete work at the end if you're doing all deltas? So what we do is we mark each record. So for each execution that's broken up over bursts, what we do is every time that for every burst, we find out what are the entities that are emitted. And so we track those. And then at the end of once we reach the end of the query, so we've completed the entire data set, then we look at what's been marked against what's in the database, and we determine what that difference is, and we just delete those things. So we do like a kind of garbage collection sweep at the end of the ingestion. I hope that helps. So on top of my head, Patrick is saying, on top of my head, could something like apply mutation full shard index 0 entities for each ingestion shard help, along with apply mutation type shard count? That prune old shards. I think we could, I would like to learn more about this sharding approach. Like, I don't know what that would look like. So I think we could discuss this. I think ultimately, like, we do need something that is going to work reliably, regardless of what data size we have. And so whatever that approach ends up being, I think is what we need to figure out. And I think that, Himanshu, one of the challenges that we found is that, like, one of the things that we're working on right now is we need a way to be able to, like, we have some of this tooling, like Frontside has some of this tooling now where we could say, like, here's a data set, but what if I crank this up to 100,000 records and see how that performs? Like, we don't have, like, I would like to have something like that, so we could say, okay, well, let's try to run this entity provider in a case where there is like 100,000 records, and how does that perform? What's the memory footprint? So we're working on some tooling for doing that kind of stuff right now. So we'll hopefully be able to show that in the future. And then once we have that, then we'll be able to do this kind of benchmarks. Let me show you quickly what one of these entity providers looks like. So there's a general pattern. So the entity provider itself is really it's very simple. There's it has only three. The interface has only three methods. So there's the get provider name. That's the same as what the current entity provider has. And then there is this around and next. So around is just, this is what happens before we do an iteration. So the way that this mechanism is designed is that every iteration, essentially every page of your query runs independently from every other page. And what it does, it essentially keeps the cursor, like essentially the next cursor, and then that next cursor is used to run the next iteration. And so, so what we do is like in the around, it's essentially kind of like setup. What we do is we create a client. So in this case, this is a GitHub repositories entity provider. So we're gonna paginate over a GitHub repository search and ingest every one of those records into the catalog. So first we do the setup, and then we run the burst. And so the burst, then what it does is it's going to try to execute as many iterations within a burst that it can. So if a burst is set to, like a burst length is set to, let's say 3 seconds, it's going to try to paginate as many times within 3 seconds as it can. And it's going to, at every iteration, is going to keep essentially like do a delta commit. So we have this query. So this query has, so this is the GraphQL query that we're retrieving, that we're doing search with. So this is the GraphQL query. So it's just, all it's doing is just retrieving this information. And then what we do during the iteration is we call the API, and then we create our entities. And then we return whether it's done, and then the next cursor, and then the entities. So these entities will be committed to the register, to the catalog. These will be, this is the cursor that will be used for the next iteration, and this tells the entity provider whether or not this query is complete. So if this is true, then it's going to do it's going to do the sweep. So it's going to determine like what has been found in this iteration, like in this execution, and then delete the things that are not found anymore. So it's essentially, and this is the pattern that I think we see with a lot of entity providers, especially discovery ones. Like they all paginate through the data set. So essentially, what you could do, like the entirety of this implementation, essentially you just paginate, like you just do one page at a time. This is the API. All the internals of figuring out when to execute that and tracking each of those things is done internally by the plugin. Any other questions?
Please drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if you have any questions around this.
My only, if I'll wait for questions, but also I'm just gonna call out this. I started a discussion in the in backstage discussions about essentially what I want to get is better understanding of how people are using processors, and also what as we're preparing to migrate to using entity providers, what are the things that people need? So what I'm trying to get here is resources that are available today about entity providers, and then what you think are kind of best practices, and also kind of what considerations you have. So if you have custom processors, or you're in the process of doing a migration to entity providers, or you've learned some things about entity providers you'd like to share, please come here and share your ideas. And we'll use these things in conversations with the catalog SIG to form kind of best practice for entity providers, and then also migration guide.
The link is in the chat for this discussion.
Okay, that's it for me.
Cool.
Thank you.
Last one, Taras, like, is it open source? What do you need any kind of help? Any words on the status of the plugin so far? Do you want alpha testers or?
Yeah, it's open source. We do want alpha testers. So if you have, especially if you have large data sets that you would like to, or you're going to be writing a lot of entity providers, and you would like an API for handling handling large data sets or discovery entity providers. I would love to work with everyone to experiment with this and then see what, whether this is, this approach works. And I'd also like to see how, whether we need the sharding mechanism, or we expand on this and bring it upstream, or how, however we want. But it is open source. Like the Frontside Backstage repo is all open source, and we have all of our stuff that we're creating in here. So the Frontside Backstage instead of Backstage.
Cool. There's a question in the chat, Taras. I'd love if you could carry on, because we are at time now. So thank you everyone for joining. So as always, the CTAs are Nominate contributors, people who think are doing awesome in the community. This recording will be available on the YouTube channel, like all other Backstage videos. So you can watch it over there. Keep checking the meetups channel on Discord, where you can find the new issues whenever they're up. And see you next month in the adopters track. Keep sharing all the great work you're doing. It's really heartwarming to watch. So thank you and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.